Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week I am covering the story of some of the Aitchison family of Wallsend, many of whom were well-known doctors in Wallsend in the past. Obviously this is not a history of every member of the family, just some details about some of the more well-known ones. I hope you will enjoy it and find it interesting. Dr. James Aitchison was born in Scotland in around 1811 and married Thomasina Park in 1843. By 1851 the family had moved to Wallsend and had 4 children, and by 1861 the family were living at Park Villa and they now had 8 children. I did wonder just recently if Park Villa was possibly named using Thomasina's maiden name. Dr. James Aitchison was the first Dr. Aitchison of Wallsend. Sadly, there is not a great deal of information about James, but apart from being a GP, he was also the medical officer for Wallsend and responsible for the monthly health reports. He died in 1884 at the age of 73, and at that time he had been a doctor in Wallsend for 47 years. After his death, his son, Dr. Henry Heslop Aitchison, succeeded him in the role of medical officer. This was not just a case of his replacing his father, though. The role was advertised and only he and Dr. Wilson applied for the job, and Dr. Aitchison won the ballot by 6 votes to 3. Thomasina, James's widow, died in 1890 at the age of 70. At the time of her death, she was described as being a very well-respected member of the community and the mother of 4 doctors. Both James and Thomasina are buried in Churchbank Cemetery in Wallsend in the family plot. Sadly, the headstone is quite hard to read from the photo on screen at the moment, but I still wanted to include it in this video. Dr. Andrew Aitchison was the eldest son of James and Thomasina, who was born in 1847, and in 1869 a letter appeared in the local newspapers detailing his application for the post of senior house surgeon at the Newcastle Infirmary. The Newcastle Infirmary, for anyone who doesn't know, was at Forth Banks and was later replaced by the RVI Hospital. Andrew details his various qualifications and his extensive experience, having spent 5 years as an apprentice to his father James at Wallsend. Sadly, I was not able to find any further information, so I do not know if he was successful in his application. However, in 1871 he was still classed as a GP. Andrew died in Wallsend in May of 1883 at the age of only 36. And he is buried in Churchbank Cemetery. Dr. Henry Heslop Aitchison was born in Wallsend in 1860. He was the 5th son of James and Thomasina. He married Jemima Leslie in 1895. Jemima was said to be the adopted daughter of Andrew Leslie of Hawthorne Leslie fame, and she was around 15 years younger than her husband. The wedding took place in Jesmond, as this was where Jemima lived at the time. It was a very lavish affair, with many well-known public figures of the time in Wallsend in attendance, who were said to have made the journey to Jesmond from Wallsend. These included people such as Robert Richardson Dees and Mr. and Mrs. George Burton Hunter. Jemima's dress was described as being made of white satin, and her veil was linked with sprigs of blossom suspended by diamond and sapphire pins. It was no doubt an expensive dress, and it seems a shame that this was at a time when the newspapers did not print any photos, as I would have quite liked to have seen what it looked like. The presents were another thing that caught my eye. The groom gave his wife gifts of a diamond brooch and a diamond and sapphire pin, and in return she gave him a silver-mounted dressing bag and a gold locket. Without a doubt, it's clear to see that the family on both sides were very wealthy. The gifts given them to them by the guests included a silver tea service, a silver reading lamp with a silk shade, a silver butter dish, a silver cake stand, silver spoons and silver candlesticks, to name just a few of the items. Mr. and Mrs. Hunter gave them the gift of an antique writing cabinet, and Robert Richardson Dees even bought them something that was described as a valuable volume containing original Turner paintings, and I do wonder if they were passed down the family for many years to come. It makes a massive difference to the kind of wedding gifts that I got when I was first married, and it's also a huge difference to the tea towels that I used to buy for my friends when they got married. The happy couple left for London by the train in the afternoon to then continue on to Paris for their honeymoon. Wallsend was not forgotten in the celebrations, as in the evening a tea was held for the poor of the town, with over 300 people invited. It was said at the time that Dr. Henry Aitchison had taken over from his father James with his care for the less fortunate of Wallsend. Henry and Jemima would go on to live in Park Villa in Wallsend. However, it must be pointed out that in the census of 1911, and also some prior to this, Park Villa was actually classed as being in Walker. The couple had at least 5 children together. Their son, Andrew Leslie Aitchison, joined the 1st Battalion of the King's Own Scottish Borderers at the start of World War I. He did not arrive in France until early 1916, and sadly he was wounded in action on October the 22nd, 1916, and details of the day he was wounded state that the weather was very bad with continuous rain, and it was also very cold. He died on November the 3rd, 1916, at the young age of only 20 years, and he is buried in the Hailey Station Cemetery in France. Although I don't know which son, as the article I read did not give a Christian name, another of Henry and Jemima's sons was an eye specialist in Newcastle, and this may have been Henry Jr. or John. Jemima was well known for her love of dogs and would often enter the local dog shows, where she frequently took first prize, such as at the Gateshead Easter Dog Show in 1904. And in 1906 at the Newcastle Dog Show, among other prizes, she won the Silver Challenge Cup with a value of 25 guineas, so it was not a prize to be sniffed at. Obviously, I will leave it there with this part of the story, as it would not be very interesting to just mention all the times that she won first prize at the various dog shows. Dr. Henry Aitchison was the doctor who would be in attendance at the death of Kathleen Alice O'Brady Jones, the daughter of the then Vicar of St. Luke's, in 1894, when she was sadly killed in a shooting accident outside the Co-op Hall on Carville Road. For anyone who has not heard the story, I did cover it in another video last year. Dr. Henry Aitchison retired from his medical practice in 1930. He had been a very busy man all of his life, being a county magistrate, an alderman, the vaccination officer for Wallsend, the vice chairman for the Princess Mary Maternity Hospital, and the medical officer for the Wallsend and Willington Quay Joint Hospital for Infectious Diseases. And on top of this, he was the captain of the Wallsend Cricket 11 for 23 years. Henry died in 1940 at the age of 80. At the time of his death, it was said that he had been a doctor in Wallsend for 59 years. His funeral would take place at Churchbank Cemetery, and his wife Jemima died, I believe, in 1951. His brother James, who was also a doctor, died just 1 week after Henry in 1940. His death announcement described him as being the last of the 4 doctor brothers, and he is buried in Jesmond Old Cemetery. Thomas Aitchison, also a doctor and another son of James and Thomasina, lived in Phillipson Street in Willington Quay with his sister Helen. Thomas never married, and he ran his medical practice from his home in Willington Quay. He died at the age of 79 in 1930 and is also mentioned on the family plot in Churchbank Cemetery. However, the writing on this photo is sadly impossible to read. The last member of the Aitchison family that I will include in this video is Miss Helen Aitchison. Never married, she was the daughter of James and Thomasina. Helen was a Justice of the Peace for the borough and was the first woman member of the Northumberland County Council, and for several years she represented Willington Quay. And she also served on the Old Tynemouth Board of Guardians. She had taken a keen interest in the Nursing Association, and during World War I she did a lot of work to help soldiers and their dependents. She had, for many years, along with other members of her family, been connected to the Willington Quay Presbyterian Church. Helen died at her home in Phillipson Street in Willington Quay in September of 1936 at the age of around 79, and she is also buried in Churchbank Cemetery. I would just like to add that although several of the Aitchison family are mentioned on the headstone of the family plot in Churchbank Cemetery, this doesn't always mean that they are buried directly underneath it. It was stated for one of the funerals that they hoped to be buried near to their parents in the cemetery, so some may be buried in the plots surrounding the original headstone. I do hope that you have found this little history of some of the Aitchison family interesting, and I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.